Welcome to What's More or Less. My name is Jason, and I've got another thought for you today regarding campaign promises. That's something that kind of comes up a lot when people are talking about Iran and President Trump. This is what he promised he would be, etc. And so let's talk about how legally binding are campaign promises to the victor. Simple answer, short answer is they're pretty much not. We have the Declaration of Independence concept of the consent of the governed, yet that concept we have chosen to apply it permanently to certain thresholds and certain means for establishing what is the government. Okay, so the consent of the governed in the United States can go no further than what the Constitution allows. A candidate cannot win unless they gain the votes through whatever system the Constitution sets up. If it's the House of Representatives, it's a popular election in their state. Times, manners, and places set up by the state itself. If it's the Senate, originally it was set up where the legislature of the state chose somebody from the legislature to go be a senator for 6 years. That's been replaced by the 17th Amendment, to where now that's a popular election too. If it's the president, it's the Electoral College. And if you don't understand the Electoral College, you need to. You need to understand what a more perfect union is. We are not a regular nation. We aren't simply a bunch of nations with some kind of big old treaty either. It's something bigger than that. And the term for it that the Constitution officially lays out is more perfect union. So that's what we are. Whether or not all the other places around the world are more perfect unions, that's what we are, a more perfect union. Okay? And so you have to understand the Electoral College. It's very important. Okay? Then the judges are put in by way of nomination from the president and 2/3 approval from the Senate. Okay? Now, then there are different thresholds for getting different acts passed depending on which kind of act you want to pass. If you want to amend the Constitution, for example, it needs to either be proposed by 2/3 of federal Congress or 2/3 of state Congresses, which then, once it's proposed, it needs to be ratified by 3/4 of state Congresses. That's the only way you can grab more optional powers or more promises or more prohibitions for the Constitution. So, are the campaign promises of a candidate for government legally binding? Not really. We've already made what our consent is, our version of consent. And look at defending our divinely inspired Constitution. The Constitution was set up by the people's consent according to Article 7 and according to the preamble itself. And then afterwards, I'll be in a minute. Afterwards, sorry about that. My wife is making lunch for me, and she knows I sit out here and watch the dogs eat before I come in. But anyhow. I'm just going to leave this as is. I'm not going to edit it out. I don't use high tech. I just put my phone up here while I'm making sure that the feeding goes well. The people's consent has already been given for how our consent will be given in the future. To modify that would require an act of secession. And that's it. And secession is not prohibited in the Constitution. If you want to say the Articles of Confederation are still legally binding the permanent union, maybe, I guess. I don't think so. We violated them in the creation of the Constitution. So, so the president or whatever candidate it is, whatever they've promised in their campaign promises, if they promise something the Constitution doesn't allow, not my fault. It's not my fault. You should know the Constitution, and you should recognize when your candidate is promising something the Constitution doesn't allow. By the way, the Constitution is not what the courts say it is. My church directly, President Benson has directly rejected that. President Oaks has taken several jabs at it, and no, there is no. You have to be able to recognize grapes from grapefruit. Okay, the Constitution is the grapefruit. It's something big. It's something massive. The grapefruit is judicial supremacy. Okay, in other words, to get a bill passed, for example, to become law, it has to go through House of Representatives and the Senate, and then the President, or else 2/3 of both houses. To get an amendment to the Constitution, it has to go through either 2/3 of the states or 2/3 of the federal Congress, and then 3/4 of the state legislatures ratifying. To get a treaty, which is only external agreements, period, that's all they were ever intended to be, is the president proposing, and then the Senate advises and consents. So in other words, they help to formulate the treaty, and then you need 2/3 of them to approve of it. Okay, and then there's nothing like that with judicial supremacy. It's just 5 out of 9 judges. No, it's not real. The Constitution is what the Constitution is. Any candidate who promises something the Constitution doesn't allow, that promise that they made in their campaign isn't legally binding. I don't care if, the Electoral College, I don't care if they win the popular vote. It's just not the means. It's just not the means. I don't care if they win the popular vote by 90% of the country. It's just not the means we approved of. If they won by that much, they should then have a mandate to get the Constitution amended if it's that stinking powerful, right? That's it. So that's how legally binding campaign promises are. They're not. And to top it off, the Constitution itself addresses the concept of secrecy and intelligence and all that kind of stuff. So whenever somebody wins an election and suddenly is in office and suddenly seeing the intelligence, there are things they know that they didn't know prior to running anyhow. So, yeah. At some point there has to be trust in government. And if we don't trust them, that's pretty sad commentary, right? But I think prudence would dictate right now, say for example with the President Trump thing, that there's enough information we should all have that we should be reasonably suspicious that he got some kind of intelligence regarding Iran. And that's where I am. That's where I am with it. And I'm not a huge Mr. Yeah, Trump type of guy. But that's where I am with it. I think the Constitution sets that up. And I think to say declare war means the only type of military action that can ever be taken is declared wars, it's just not true. There's no exclusivity clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. No, that's not there. And there's no preventative clause in Article 2, Section 2. It's just not there. So that's it, you guys. And no, we might be paying a price for this, by the way. It might be hard on us economically. The Constitution does nothing to promise a thriving economy. It says it has some basic things that allow for an honest economy. But this whole thing of getting rich and staying rich, all that kind of stuff, no. As a matter of fact, Jefferson promoted the idea of agrarianism, to be prepared for these kind of things, to not be dependent on the government for everything. So, and that's what my church promotes too. So that's it. All right, guys, thanks for listening.